Army Ranger talks about the failed Mission 1 Zulu mission resulting in the death of several Rangers. Pat Lyon's Silver Star and a Purple Heart, as well as other military honors, for his service as a long-range reconnaissance patrol ranger during the Vietnam War. Human error on the May 1968 Mission 1 Zulu resulted in the death of several Rangers. Pat came very close to being one of those fatalities. "I can't believe I'm here to tell you this," Pat Lyon says. 3 teams were being sent out because the Vietnamese were coming over a mountain, somehow, somewhere. The first 2 teams were put together and I agreed to go out as the assistant team leader on the 3rd team. So we made the flight over, found out where we were going to land and where we were going to get picked up. The top of the mountain had a saddle-like ridge with a low spot in the center. Both the team leader and I looked at that and said we had to find out what was going on up there. By the time the team spent the day fighting their way through the incredibly thick jungle, they were exhausted. As a rule, we never walked out into an open area, but the team leader did, so we followed him. We were looking at the saddle when he realized what he'd done. There wasn't a noise, not a sound. There wasn't even a bug moving. About that time, a sniper's shot rang out, and one of our guys was hit multiple times. 3 of us grabbed him and moved him off into the thick jungle. I opened up a clip or 2 across the mountain in front of me, but I didn't see anything, not a thing. So I called in medevac because the radio operator's radio wouldn't work even after the batteries were changed out. Pat recalls that medevac got there quickly, but the enemy's burst of fire almost shot it out of the sky. We didn't know it at the time, but that bowl was an extensive North Vietnamese complex. Although we didn't know it then, tunnels ran out the backside of the mountain. There were a whole bunch of people up there, maybe 100 to 400 soldiers. This was no little deal. I saw the odd person run wearing a kind of bluish suit or shirt, North Vietnamese. By that point, I couldn't see the other members of our team. I didn't know where they had gone. It was a weird feeling. I noticed that out in front of me was an old, deep and wide bomb crater. If somebody crawled into it, I wouldn't know it until they popped up in my face. Pat threw a grenade into the hole to make himself feel better. Out of nowhere, the team leader showed up. I had already been wounded in my right arm below the elbow by some shrapnel from an explosion. Maybe a grenade. I don't know. I told him medevac had just about gotten shot out of the sky and they'd thrown a stretcher. Then I had called for a gunship. Instead of popping smoke to indicate our location, he put a strobe light on his chest and started flashing it at the helicopter. I told the helicopter to identify the strobe light. Then, when the team leader turned and hit the strobe light button, he was shot. Bang, bang, bang. I knocked the strobe light out of his hand and pulled him down next to me. I put my hand on his chest to try and stop the bleeding. Then I rolled the smoke off the end of my fingertips and left it for the helicopter to see. That's when the first round started. It actually hit a tree right close to me. If that rocket would have hit me, I wouldn't be here. It exploded and then another rocket blew up. That's when the North Vietnamese began emptying their guns on us. I reached over and looked at the team leader. His eyes were gray and no blood was pumping, so I just pulled him down next to me. There was nothing I could do. The helicopter pilot, who witnessed the assault, asked in a hushed tone if he had anybody left down there to talk to. I replied, "You do." He asked how I was doing and I told him I was dying. He knew where I was because he'd seen the concussion of the rocket blow me 5 feet in the air. He said I bounced. He asked what I wanted him to do. He stopped over top of me and fired the miniguns. They're hot coming out of that gun and hundreds of shells were pummeling down on me. Then the helicopter pulled away. My radio is still working and I hear, "Pat, we've got a quick reaction team coming in to get you." Okay, great, I thought. They're going to try to get anybody that's alive out on the helicopter and grab bodies. The helicopter came in and was shot up, too. The medevac helicopter wouldn't come back, but a gunship chopper did. Expending its ammunition to keep the enemy away from Pat, it then dropped down and pulled out 5 or 6 soldiers. A third gunship repeated the process. Even though the quick reaction force had landed, I couldn't see them. They were trying to find me, the missing ranger. Everything said on the radio had to go to Camp Evans, Vietnam, and then relayed back to me. I couldn't talk to the team directly. The 15 guys on that team never made it and were pulled out by helicopter. Out of nowhere, a soldier, Eddie Kent from the 196th Infantry Division, crawls up to me. He is part of a platoon they'd sent in for me. The platoon's arrival took the pressure off me because the North Vietnamese started back up the mountain. Ken looks at the soldier I'm with, tells me the guy is dead and says he needs to get me out of there. Pat was badly shot up. His rescuer decided to grab him by his arm because he had more holes in his back than his leg. He passed out from loss of blood and pain as he was dragged down the hill. When the medics offered him morphine when he regained consciousness, Pat declined. "You don't know where I'm hit," I told them. Besides, I was going to pass out anyway. When I asked him about the other guys, he said they hadn't found any other guys. The next morning when I woke up, it sounded like there was a whole herd of helicopters coming in on top of me. 2 guys walked over, picked me up and put me on a stretcher. A soldier came running toward me, hunched over, and stood at my feet. He started to speak, to thank me, when a sniper dropped him dead. Pat was transported and treated at Camp Evans before he was sent on to Da Nang. The doctor is rolling me over back and forth. I had shrapnel all over my back and at the base of my spine, and half my leg was gone. They're telling me they'll take my leg off once they get me to Hawaii. So they boxed me up, flew me to Tripler Hospital on Oahu and put me in the amputee ward. I'm 19 years old and that isn't about to happen. A doctor, who is going to make a decision about the amputation, comes in one morning. The nurse tells him I vent the bed frame with my injured leg. Well, it may have been made of aluminum, so that settled that. They put 108 steel stitches in my leg and pulled me back together. I still have shrapnel in my back. I had a couple of pieces taken out last month, Pat says. If he had to do it all over, Pat says he would still volunteer to train as a long-range recon patrol ranger. God bless our vets.